We're bringing the heavy metal this week with a spotlight on the latest Combaticon to be released from the Age of the Primes line, Brawl. More than a review, you'll get scale comparisons, display and team build ideas, transformation tips, and a whole lot more. Only at Heroic Nonsense. Let's go. Finally past the halfway point for Bruticus, and I couldn't be more excited. Brawl was one of the Combaticons I was most looking forward to, and now that he's here, I couldn't be happier. I missed out on getting Bruticus and the Combaticons back in the day, not sure why though, because I was still heavily collecting Transformers at that time, and loved the Combaticons from the cartoon. If I could go back in time, I'd have totally gotten the whole set. At least we now have a great update to the figure, and what's shaping up to be an awesome looking team of Combaticons. As far as this specific Combaticon release goes, Brawl is right there at the top for me. Great looking figure, very cool earth-based tank mode, and an overall well-built figure with a fun transformation. So let's take it to the dogs, roll out, and see what Brawl's all about. I have to say, for a Voyager class figure, Brawl is extremely well built with some really nice engineering, has some great paint applications, and just overall looks very cool. Exactly how I'd like my Combaticons to look. To be honest, minus one small nitpick I have, which I'll get into later, he is a perfect update to the classic figure, and he combines. As of right now, he's probably my favorite out of the 3 Combaticons released, though Blastoff is a close second. As he doesn't come with the instructions or pieces to combine, I'll have to hold off on commenting on that aspect for the moment, but from what I've seen from the released images, Bruticus is shaping up to be an awesome addition to the combiner teams. I've always liked the Combaticons as a team, designs and all, but Brawl definitely stood out for me from the rest of the limbs. Something about him being a tank mixed in with that amazing cold, faceless head design works. While a bit more detailed than the recent Studio Series 86 spots, he still has a very clean overall look to him. He's mostly brown with some gunmetal grays and extremely well proportioned, with that head sculpt that totally makes a bot. Though I do really also like how they designed that chest and the cool space below it that gives him a very Jaeger feel to him. While his legs do stick out a bit from the sides, they fit given his overall look and heavy duty design, perfect for trudging through the battlefield mud. Otherwise, he's nicely streamlined. The back is also very clean, especially around the upper portion, though perhaps it would have been a bit nicer if they closed up the side panels of his legs, though not a big issue because of how the space is filled in with the treads. The only area that really has a bit of open space is in his lower arms, but barely noticeable and mostly covered up as compared to other similar designed bots. As for motion and balance, he can be positioned in a walking pose with no issues and looks quite intimidating, as he should. The running pose took a bit of work, but not much, and once you find the right feel, he looks incredible. I always like to rotate the one leg that's off the ground slightly in and rotate the waist in the other direction to give these types of action poses some realism. He can also crouch down in this pose fairly easily and has no issues bouncing or touching the ground with his fist. You can even bend in the back leg to give him a bit more of an aggressive feel to the same pose while still maintaining the pose and contact with the ground. He can also balance this way without his fist propping him up so that you can get him into a firing pose like I've done here. In the end, I'm not sure which of the 3 shots I actually prefer. If you guys have a favorite, let me know in the comment section. All the standard blast effects attach as expected to his laser, this design being my favorite for smaller lasers like Brawl's. I wanted to showcase here one of my favorite design elements for Brawl, where his lower arm sports a very nicely placed Decepticon symbol. I love the way the lower arm comes together during the transformation to form that Decepticon symbol, some engineering I don't think I've seen before in our collection. The turret in my images up to now was placed lower down on the back as it is meant to be. However, it can also be pushed up a bit like I've done here, which locks it in place. It doesn't change the overall look too much, though you can now see some of the turret from the front, which I think I actually prefer. As for the extra cannons he comes with, there are a myriad of ways that you can place them. And I've started with the more innovative ideas that I played around with. Because both cannons are removable, they can be placed in all these different configurations, some of which I think look quite good. But the official way of placing the launchers are like this, which is definitely also my favorite way and gives Brawl even more firepower, which is quite fitting for this character. I do have to note though that in this configuration the turret doesn't lock in place, and therefore can be a bit wobbly with the main cannon having to point downwards off of his back. If you'd like to keep the 2 extra cannons on and hidden while also ensuring some stability to the back turret so it doesn't spin, this is the way to go, though you can be limited in some movement, mostly where you might want Brawl crouching down. So overall, a really great Voyager class figure that looks amazing all around and fits in perfectly with the new updated Combaticon designs. Absolutely love this figure. Now onto the tank mode, and what a tank it is. Again, for a Voyager class figure, it's quite big and really well designed. If you're expecting a more G1 accurate version, this isn't it. G1 Brawl had what I'd say is a more stealth type design to it, with smoother angles and more streamlined. However, I think this tank generally takes design cues from a bunch of different sources, including the M1 Abrams and Challenger 2, though I'd say a bit boxier, reminiscent of some older tank models. Regardless, it definitely looks like a tank with their G1 inspired cannons mounted on the back. What I really like about this design is how all the panels come together to create a fairly cohesive look. Also, no real joints you can see on the outside frame, which I really appreciate. Even where there are some joints showing, like towards the back, they are nicely integrated into the overall design of the tank. I think this side view really highlights how nice and consistent the overall look of Brawl is. I also appreciate how great he looks from every angle. Nothing really seems out of place in this mode. Everything from the tank treads to the turret to the paneling flows. It really doesn't give away many indication of its hidden robot form. In these next few shots, I've added back in the rear mounted cannons, which are specific to Brawl and not really any tank design, but they do look great and for a Transformers figure, totally works. I think this shot probably showcases the real world inspiration for the tank design the best. Also, check out how well his laser fits into the overall design. The front looks good, nothing really to complain about. However, to really have given it a more modern look similar to the latest real world tanks, the front would have had to have been less flat. The back is probably the busiest, but I actually still think it looks fairly realistic and on second look seems fairly accurate. You can get a lot of good movement out of this design between the turret and rear mounted cannons for some great play and display. My one minor issue being that the turret is a bit wobbly in this configuration, meaning it can sometimes look like it's drooping. For an alternate version that doesn't wobble, but gives the tank a different look, you can move the turret up a bit like I've done here and lock it in place. Like the ball mode, you can have a lot of fun with these extra cannons and create some truly unique looks for Brawl's tank mode. I wouldn't necessarily do this myself, but I could see from a play perspective how this could be a lot of fun. They can get a bit bizarre though, but I imagine this one working quite well on Cybertron. As for the blast effects, as we saw earlier, they all generally fit onto his laser and definitely add to the look of the figure. But unfortunately, I couldn't find any that fit into any of the 3 cannons, which I think would have made these action poses look incredible. Still, an amazing looking tank overall, and a great addition to your collection, combiner or not. Now let's see how Brawl lines up with some of the other bots in the line, starting with of course the most important of the bunch, the Combaticons released so far. While scale will always be off as between these guys, they still look fairly consistent and 100% give me that old school G1 Combaticon feel. The bot modes are really where they shine when placed together, with Brawl being the slightly bigger of the 3. Personally, I like that they're all different heights. From an overall design perspective, I really love the way they look next to each other. Their sculpts, colors, details all work perfectly next to each other and really give you a feeling that this is a clear unit of specialized Decepticon soldiers. In terms of general scale, I think starting with some of the tanks is the best way to go, and surprisingly, I think Brawl holds up quite nicely scale-wise. From this angle, Vortex clearly looks a bit too small, but unless they did some heavy engineering, it's what we'd expect from this type of combiner. Not too bad next to the Stunticons, and while scale-wise he would be off, from a toy perspective he looks really nice and bulky. Don't forget, these are both part of the legs on their respective combiners. Really like the way he looks next to the new Studio Series 86 Thundercracker though. Probably my favorite pairing so far. Some side view comparisons now, with Studio Series 86 Megatron and Brawl actually looking pretty great next to each other. Out of all the tanks, I feel Warpath looks the most realistic, but again, these two next to each other, pretty awesome. And my favorite from all angles, SS-86 Thundercracker and Brawl. Really nice combination of military-based Decepticons. As for bot modes, like I said earlier, the Studio Series 86 line is a bit smoother and cartoony, but I feel the Age of the Primes designs fit in quite well. For those of you not sold on the new Seeker design yet and are sticking with the War for Cybertron line, you'll be happy to see how well the designs hold up next to each other. And yes, I'm planning on sticking with this version of Astrotrain. Unfortunately, I'm not digging the new Studio Series 86 design at all. As for some other combiners, he is much bigger in bot mode and I'm totally supportive of that. While I'm not focusing on the 86 movie reformatted Decepticons in this review, instead saving that for a later review of the next Combaticon, I did want to give you a sneak peek at how they compare, and actually think they look better than the pre-86 bots. But let's end on one more Studio Series 86, this time Voyager Ratchet, and you can see that they generally have the same proportions and look quite nice next to each other. So now let's take a bit of a deeper dive into how Brawl compares to Studio Series 86 Megatron, the other most recent and controversial tank released to date. Forgetting all the debate on whether Megatron should be a tank or not, I think they look great together and add some extra play and display options for SS86 Megatron. I'm actually surprised about how proportionate these two tank modes look next to each other, given that they're hugely different scales in bot mode. Adding in Studio Series 86 Thundercracker to the mix just completes this set perfectly as we move into the more cartoon accurate versions of our favorite G1 Decepticons. From this angle, all three actually look pretty good next to each other, and I like the idea of now having some updated jets, helicopters, and tanks for our G1 Decepticon roster. I bet you were wondering where Blitzwing went as the other resident tank of the Decepticons. Well, here he is. And another surprisingly cool looking and fun pairing of these two iconic Decepticon tanks. It actually makes me like the Blitzwing tank mode a lot more now for some reason, and they scale pretty well too. From the right angle, you'd think these two are pretty much 1-to-1. One more shot of Warpath next to Brawl. I really like the way they handled Warpath, and for a minibot, he was really well designed and bigger than I expected. Great match for Brawl. Finally, one more tank that I wanted to showcase, Megatronus. Totally makes sense that Megatronus in his Cybertronian tank mode is much bigger, but as far as pairings go, one of my favorites as well. They just look so good next to each other. On to the transformation, but first, a quick PA. Make sure to stick around for the display and build idea section right after this. So, first things first, let's start by opening up the front tank treads like so. We'll need this a little bit later on in the transformation. Next, we're going to fold out these pieces, and as we saw earlier, this one on the left forms a Decepticon symbol. Alright, now we'll move to the chest portion. We open it up like this, push the head down, and then we'll just close it back up. And now we'll take the whole chest and lift it up 90 degrees. You can do really whatever you want with the arms right now. I prefer to fold them down and lift them up a bit to get them out of the way. Just rotate the waist like I just did. And let's move to the legs. So unfold the bottom and then unfold the tank treads like this. A nice little bit of engineering. I don't think I've ever seen this on any of the Transformers we have, but actually a really neat little part of the transformation. Then we'll rotate the whole side of the leg with the tank treads back up. You'll see here there's some tabs. So all you need to do is click them in like so. And we'll do the same for the other side, but what I'd like to do first is click these parts of the legs in right now so it lines everything up, and we'll make things easier as soon as we get to that part. So now we'll just rotate this part, this other part of the leg up with the other tank tread. Same thing, tab it in at the two spots, and then just make sure everything's lined up nicely and in place. I'll just have to redo that one. Just push it a little bit in, and then this is pretty easy. Just fold the whole back portion in like this. Just make sure everything lines up. There's a couple little tabs that loosely fit into the side panels. I just like to push them in a couple times until it's finally transformed. And now I'm going to show you a little trick that my son came up with. So we got to move the arms up a little bit, but then fold this little flap in just a bit like that, and then click it in, and it totally makes your life a lot easier. And then that front of the tank tread we just click in. Same thing here, just push the arm up, and then you'll just push the tab in this panel in a little bit, line it up, and click it in. Same thing there, close the tread. And that's pretty much it. Just squeeze everything into place, and then you move this turret back. You kind of have to play around with it to make sure it doesn't kind of lean forward, but that's not too hard. And then right here you can see the tabs. We'll push these extra cannons into place, tab them right in, put the other one right here. And then one more thing, all we have to do is grab his laser and it tabs in right, you see right here, it's going to tab into the turret for a little bit of machine gun firepower. And that's it. Brawl is transformed and ready to roll out, Decepticon style. We'll start wrapping this Brawl spotlight up with some display and build ideas, and I have to say I had a lot of fun with these. But before we get into some of my bigger ideas, let's start with the main focus, the Combaticons, and man do these guys look good together. A little movie magic here, but you can easily recreate this shot with whatever stands you have. Once we have all 5 Combaticons in, I will most definitely create one similar to this with the aerial bots on the other side, though I think Protectobots would be best. A little fun with this one, as we know that Starscream created the Combaticons from old military vehicles lying around. And taking it one step further, a G1 cartoon inspired display of Starscream versus Megatron with some of their respective combiners. Any of you remember this awesome episode? I cannot wait to have the whole set of completed combiners, so I'm giving you a preview of Devastator next to the uncombined modes of the Combaticons released to date, which still makes for an awesome display. I will most definitely bring them all together in some future spotlight, including Menasor, so keep an eye out for that. Side note, just looking at this setup makes me realize how much I love this new Devastator. And while we're on the topic of combiners, let's see how the aerial bots look next to the Combaticons. And while I'm totally excited to see what they do for the Protectobots, I think this face-off is quite nice. They all have that same look and feel to them, which makes for a perfectly awesome showdown idea. Now that we have a bunch of Decepticon tanks, this type of display idea is a completely viable option. Blitzwing, Megatron, and Brawl. What a heavy-hitting team. And for the first time ever in my spotlights, adding in Overcharge and Blitzwing together to create an even bigger column of Decepticon tanks. Imagine these 4 thundering down the battlefield, not a sight you'd want to see if you were an Autobot. And to be honest, they look really great together as well. Makes for a really nice alt mode display idea and team build. As you all know, my ideas are meant for displays on shelves without backgrounds, but I do still enjoy adding in some accessories here and there when I can, and Energon cubes from the Blockies line fit right in. Another idea involving some movie magic that can be easily recreated with some stands, this time focusing in on this non-Combaticons team up. A few more SS-86 Seekers, and we'll have quite a robust display. Having a bunch of tanks now allows for some pretty creative uses. While this isn't really inspired by any cartoon or comic book scene, it was something I had floating around in my mind and just looks so great. I'm really loving being able to use all of these different Transformers lines together from a G1 perspective. If you want some lone wolf action, this is the way to go. A few G.I. Joe classified based explosions with a Transformers blast effect, and you have yourself a great little display if you don't have room for full-on battle sets. And finally, my favorite, my most G1 inspired display of them all, mixing in the age of the Primes Combaticons with the recent Studio Series 86 Decepticons. And wow, does this look great. Completely takes me back to the 80s and how I imagined our toys would look with accurate cartoon designs. Now pulling in the rest of our permanent display updated Decepticons that we currently have, and what a team. I'm separating out some of the older designs as we start getting in the newer Studio Series Seekers and wait for Studio Series 86 Soundwave to come in. I have a few more Decepticons from previous lines that we'll keep in our newest updated displays, but I'll save that for another time. But for now, this will be our go-to display of the G1 Decepticons. What do you guys think, and do you have your own ideas for displaying the Combaticons? Let the Heroic Nonsense community know below. I'm going to throw in one more bonus pairing, one using Full Tilt from the second release of Trypticon. I don't know why, but I just like these two displayed together. I also really like the Full Tilt figure and opened him up not too long ago, so perhaps he's on my mind. Regardless, it gives me retro 80s vibes thinking of these guys together on Cybertron. Not really a display idea I'll likely keep, at least for the moment, but one I think I can expand on in the future. Time to wrap it all up with a review of the box art, and what a great one it is. Look at the combination of Brawl in both modes. I'd love to read a comic book based off of this style. Some of this box art is just really so incredible. Love this Bruticus side panel art, which we've already seen as well. It's making me impatient for the last two Combaticons. Nice little design as usual for the back, no real background, but some cool shots of both modes of the actual toy. So that's it guys, the Combaticons got a huge boost with Brawl being released, and we're on our way to completing the 4th set of recent combiners. Hope you enjoyed this spotlight and that it inspired you to develop your own ideas for your shelves. We're back on track with weekly spotlights planned for the next little while, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notify button so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's all such heroic nonsense in the end.
Transform!